My name is Tim Gibbs. I'm the CEO of Four Corners Economic Development, and we're just tickled to have as many people here today to hear a really important message about what's going on for the economy of San Juan County and this region. These breakfasts, these quarterly breakfasts, are incredibly important to get in front of the business leaders and our political leaders the most relevant information possible about what's going on today and what's going to likely go on tomorrow and how it can affect your businesses. If I name every single elected official here, we're going to be here for a long time, okay? I do want to say thank you to our partners, to our elected officials that are here today. I want to say thank you to my board members that make this these things happen and empower Four Corners Economic Development to be a driver of economic development for this region. I also want to say that this particular breakfast is really important for this region. We're going to be talking about not just natural gas. It's not an abstract commodity, but it's a foundational part of who we are, how this community was built, and where we may be going next as well. For generations, the Four Corners region of New Mexico and even southwest Colorado has been shaped by energy. Natural gas built families, funded schools, supported small businesses, and created opportunities across the basin. It has powered homes, industry, livelihood, and it remains deeply tied to the regional identity and the economic resilience of this community. Today we're here in an important moment. There is significant activity and renewed interest in both the San Juan Basin and the Mancos play. And that's what's happening. It's not just a continuation of the past. It represents a new phase of development, investment, and technical innovation. This kind of activity that people in this room and across this community need to understand is clear. What it is, what it isn't, what it can mean for jobs, revenue, infrastructure, and for long-term stability for this community. We are fortunate to have companies willing to operate here, invest here, and speak directly to this community about what they're doing and why. We're also fortunate to live in a region that understands energy, not just emotionally, but practically, and knows how to choose responsible development, environmental stewardship, and economic opportunity must be connected. This morning, you will hear updates from Wash Engineering and Production Company, Lagos Energy, and Merrion Oil and Gas. They will share what they see going on the ground, the scale, the current, and the planned activity, and how this development fits into the broader energy landscape of the San Juan Basin, the state of New Mexico, and the United States. Our goal today is straightforward. It's to provide clarity, context, credible information, so that the community leaders, the businesses, and the residents understand what's unfolding and how it may shape the future of this region. With that, I want to thank you for being here this morning. We appreciate the engagement, your interest, your commitment to the economic future of Northwest New Mexico and Southwest Colorado. We will have three speakers today. We will have J. Paul McWilliams, president of Lagos Resources first, and I will do his introduction. And then we will have John Thompson and Ryan Merrion on a panel with J. Paul doing a presentation and even taking questions from the audience today. So it's going to be a fact-filled, fast-moving, informational session for you to know where we are and where we're going in the future. Four Corners Economic Development is a regional organization that serves all of San Juan County. I've been told I'm not allowed to leave the stage unless I make one pitch. On the table, there's membership forms. We do powerful things, but we're a force multiplier. We help our cities, we help the counties, we help our businesses, we help new businesses, we recruit new businesses, but we need the voice and the support of the community as well. We're hoping for 3 new members today. That's our goal. 3 people that hear about who we are, what we do, and why it's important for this community. So we're happy that you're here, and it's my honor to do the introduction for our first speaker. J. Paul McWilliams is the Chief Executive Officer of Lagos Energy, LLC. Since co-founding the company in 2022, McWilliams and his team has successfully built a premier position in the San Juan Basin, comprised of over 240,000 net acres and producing over 400 MMCFE PD. Prior to co-founding Lagos Energy, McWilliams founded Lagos 1 and 2, where he led the successful development and the modernization of a large portion of the company's assets, providing top-tier return for capital deployment. While running Lagos 1 and 2 for the past decade, McWilliams has raised over $1 billion in debt and equity capital, and he and his team have delivered solid financial returns to all investors during multiple extreme financial cycles in the energy industry. He has earned his Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering with the highest honors from New Mexico Tech, has an MBA from Fujudo, mispronounced that, by the way, School of Business at the Duke University, where he was a scholar. He currently serves on the Center for Energy Development and for Global Environment Board at Duke University. It's my pleasure to bring J. Paul McWilliams to the podium.
All right, well, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join me today. And Ryan and John, excited about today's presentation. Before we get kicked off, I've been told you always should start out with a joke. And so as Tim was reading my stupid long bio, which I need to shorten, he mentioned that I'm an engineer. And when us engineers, we can be a little awkward. And just want to ask, what is the difference between an introverted engineer and an extroverted engineer? An introverted engineer looks at their shoes when they're talking to you. An extroverted engineer looks at your shoes. So apologies if we chat. Yeah, Cliff's an engineer. He got an engineering degree, so he's clapping. So apologies if I'm a little awkward when we speak afterwards. But excited to be here today. Be talking about San Juan Basin natural gas prices. That's this slide my lawyer makes me put in all presentations. As we get into today's presentation, really going to focus on kind of looking at the past natural gas prices over the last 25 years, the present, where natural gas prices are at, and then the future as we go through. And so this plot here on the upper left-hand side is natural gas prices, inflation-adjusted natural gas prices, starting in 2020, going all the way through to current. I think that I have here on the plot, San Juan Basin natural gas prices equals roller coaster. And if you look at that price volatility in thinking through, there's a lot of business owners here. If you were to think about a gallon of milk, sometimes ranging from everywhere from a quarter to $30, that's natural gas prices, and that's the environment that we have to work in here in the industry. One of the things about natural gas prices that we'll be talking about today, it's incredibly complex. And so as a whole, the overall system is incredibly complex, way more complex than oil prices, oddly enough, because you have several major sources of oil, imports, exports, et cetera. Natural gas, we have multiple markets throughout the country, and the pricing in those different markets varies substantially. For example, most recently, in last week, Henry Hub, which I'll be talking about, the headline prices that you all see if you watch CNBC or whatever, they were over $7. At the same time, San Juan Basin, we were getting $1.50. And so there's huge regional disconnects, and it goes both ways. Sometimes we're significantly higher, sometimes we're significantly lower. But as I look through the past over the last 25 years, and it's kind of my beginning in the oil and gas industry, but also it's kind of the period of time when many of us in the room were here and the industry was booming. And so I'll be kind of talking through how the prices have evolved over the last 25 years, again, going into the current, and then what the future looks like. Ultimately, when you look at the roller coaster of prices, it has been a very tough business to be in over the last 25 years. As you can see from this plot, ultimately, we had very high prices in the 2000s, but it has been a brutal 15 years or so. We did have a nice little sweet spot in 2021 through 2023. It was late 21 and early 2023. So ultimately, we did have a nice little bump there. But overall, this has been a tough business to be in. And it's funny when people ask me what I do. First and foremost, I say I'm an entrepreneur because I am at heart. But they ask what industry you're in, and I say I'm in oil and gas. And they're like, "Ooh, okay." I'm like, "No, we're in natural gas. You don't understand. This is a little bit different. It's not an easy place to print money, but." Getting into, and so as we look at the structural change that has occurred in natural gas markets, I say structural, it's in the supply side and the demand side. On the supply side, because of the shale revolution, we are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, the United States is, but with that comes much lower prices and a lot more volatility. And so, again, getting into the overall thesis, understanding the past really gives us a good light, sheds a good light on the present and the future. So I'll be talking about those in depth. I'm used to being able to talk to slides, and so I'm printing these out, so forgive me. Before I get started, I'll give my apologies. It's a little bit of a bragging slide on Lagos, but more than anything, I just want to kind of give you the context of why I'm up here and kind of who we are as a company and what we've done here in the basin over the years. And so the company itself, we are one of the largest producers in the San Juan Basin. I think we're second right now in terms of overall amount of volume that we're moving. We have around 240,000 acres, and we're producing over 400 million a day natural gas equivalent. That's what, as Tim was reading off the MCFE per day. So ultimately, we're moving a lot of gas. We've more than tripled production since 2022, and so we have been the most active producer in the Mancos Shale, which really is I'll talk through, it is the future of the basin. It's a huge resource play. Ultimately, there are thousands of wells to be drilled here, and so as we think about future development, it will be horizontal development in the Mancos Shale. That's where there's just a huge resource here, and will play a huge part of the future supply shortages that we'll be looking at in the next couple of decades. Ultimately, yeah, we've drilled the majority of the wells in the play. I'm very proud of the fact that we've drilled 28 of the top 36 wells in the history of the San Juan Basin, including the most prolific, probably 3 at this point. I'm fourth generation to work in the oil and gas industry. My great-grandfather, great-great-uncle helped drill the first commercial well in the basin. Every generation has worked in the industry. Since then, now everybody's blue-collar. Don't think I inherited anything besides a good, solid work ethic and a little bit of knowledge about the industry. But ultimately, very proud of the team in putting on some of the best wells in the history of this 100-year-old basin. When we think about we'll be talking about wells. We only drilled 15 wells last year, but with that represented, the amount of volume we put on represents, from those 15 wells, 10% of the San Juan Basin's production at this point. So huge basin, 20,000 wells producing. Ultimately, the 15 wells that we put on last year are 10% of the San Juan Basin. So a well is not a well these days, and like to think about lateral footage that's drilled. We drilled 170,000 lateral foot, and a well being kind of 10 to 20 times of what a well used to be back in the 2000s. And so really efficient from a development standpoint. But with that, I'll wrap up. And we have a large inventory of future development locations. And with that, I'll wrap up the Lagos commercial. Getting into the meat of the presentation for what you're all here to listen to. Looking at the past, looking at 1995 through 2002, really it was basins like the San Juan Basin that really set the floor and ceiling of natural gas prices. And so really the prices were dictated by how much we could produce gas for, what it cost us as we were drilling new wells. The San Juan Basin was very blessed in the sense that it had the most prolific coal bed methane formation in the world ultimately, and there was also some tax credits that went along with that. And so kind of, 90s through into the 2000s, the San Juan Basin was really, I would say, the most prolific basin in the country. And so what we could drill and produce wells for ultimately set the stage for what prices would trade at. If you kind of think through that period of time, the prices were reflective of scarcity rather than transportation constraints. And so right now, as I talk about the different pricing across all of the different basins, that's really driven by transportation constraints. And so various basins would be producing significantly more gas if they had the pipeline to take the gas out of their region. But historically, really, prices were driven by what it costs to put wells online versus some of those regional constraints. All right, so getting back to the good old days, 2003 through 2008, this is really, I think, when the San Juan Basin was the most busy in the history of the basin. There were close to 40 rigs, I think, running at the time in the basin, in contrast to now, what do we have, three or four rigs running? Ultimately, this period here, and I have it circled, the price is substantially higher than what we're seeing right now. Prices range from $6 an MMBTU or $6 an MCF to $12 versus we got $1.50 probably yesterday. I think maybe we got $1.80 yesterday in terms of our pricing. And so kind of putting that in context, prices significantly higher during that period. As such, the basin was incredibly active in drilling wells here in San Juan. And then anytime there was a weather disruption or hurricane, prices just shot through the roof because there would be a temporary shortage of natural gas. And that's where you see some of those price spikes. And so, again, this was kind of the boom days that we had here in the basin. Ultimately, the Mancos Shale is an incredibly prolific play, and there's tons of opportunity. I think there's 2 decades worth of drilling inventory. We'll never get back to kind of the activity levels that we had back then, where there are 35 rigs running, because you're so much more efficient in terms of the horizontal wells being, 10 to 20 wells in comparison to, one rig drilling a well at a time. And then the cycle time, we've drilled a well in 15 days this last year. And so think about that, it's equivalent to, again, 10 to 20 wells, and we're drilling them in 15 days. Getting into the next slide. All right, so 2006 through 2012, this is when we still had good prices at the beginning of that period, higher prices at that time. However, ultimately, the shale revolution was starting to take place. And so the shale revolution, I have a little pictorial about what drilling horizontally in a shale looks like. But ultimately, folks were really starting to discover, there had been shale wells drilled prior to 2006, but that was really when the industry started figuring it out. I was very blessed at that time I was working mergers and acquisitions in Houston. So my job was to go out and buy. I was working for a large publicly traded company. My job was to go and buy companies like Lagos, and very, very active during that period, led north of a dozen deals, over $1 billion in successful transactions all over the country, although a lot of the deals I did were in the Permian Basin. With that, I had a front row seat to this technological revolution that was taking place in the oil and gas industry, seeing old oil and gas basin after old oil and gas basin being completely revitalized, such as the Permian and many other basins. With that, also having my ear to the ground, my wife Krista and partner in crime at Lagos, she had an engineering consulting firm at the time, so and she was working for ConocoPhillips. They were one of many clients that she had. Ultimately, knowing the San Juan Basin was drilling and completing wells in a very similar way as they were when we first got out of school in 2002, which was very similar to what they were doing in a decade earlier, or even 2 decades earlier. And so really kind of being able to see that, all right, this horizontal drilling, this fracking, it can apply here in the San Juan Basin. Ultimately left the corporate world in 2011 to buy assets in the oil window of the San Juan Basin. And we were right there at the beginning of the Gallup horizontal play, which was really the play that the basin was most active in the 2010s. But again, ultimately, the shale revolution is what drove prices kind of into the ground starting in 2008 and beyond. And so really low prices from there forward as the activity in the shale basins continued to pick up speed. And then, and prices collapsed, as did the pricing, or as is the activity level in the San Juan Basin. Looking at getting to this slide here, for those of you who are unfamiliar with what horizontal drilling is, and my apologies if I use like industry buzzwords, but ultimately, if you look at this pictorial here, historically, as that wellbore, you can see that wellbore going straight down. We would drill a well and just complete a few zones along a vertical wellbore. Now we're going down, we're turning the drill bit sideways. We're drilling as far as 4 miles long. We drilled our first 4 mile long lateral. And so ultimately you develop so much more resource with the horizontal development. Again, I keep saying the 10 to 20 wells. The great thing for our overall landscape here in the San Juan Basin, you're developing huge acreage blocks, miles and miles of acreage blocks from one single pad. And so I think all of us have probably flown over our region at some time or another into the Durango airport, and there's a lot of well locations, very few well locations required for horizontal drilling. And so the overall footprint is significantly less than the historical footprint. And this is really important, especially as we think about most of our lands being federal lands, being able to get permits, drilling permits, and the like. The disruption that we're making on those federal lands is very minimal. Okay, so kind of getting into the present. Again, this is a little bit more zoomed in natural gas plot than the previous plots, and so I took out some of I capped it at $20 an M, and I can talk about the beautiful period when we got significantly higher than that. But ultimately, kind of zooming in again, since 2012, significantly lower prices driven by the shale revolution that took place all across the country. But I'll say the biggest driver of our really low gas prices right now are the Permian Basin. Is the Permian Basin. And so Permian Basin being the most prolific oil play in the country, and you could argue it's the most prolific play in the world. As they drill those oil wells, many of you know this, but as they drill those oil wells, they produce natural gas as well. But the economics are driven by the oil production, the oil volumes, and so they don't care about the gas. And so they see as low as negative $5 an MCF for their gas, but because their economics are driven by oil prices, they can keep on drilling, where obviously here in the San Juan Basin, we get below $3. It's pretty tough to drill an economic well. And so I'll talk about it a little bit later in the presentation, but the Permian Basin has just been growing leaps and bounds, and so that's crowding out our market share going to the West Coast. Now, the positive side is there's only so much gas that they can send to the West Coast because of those infrastructure constraints that I talked about, and so their production is limited on how much they can send to the West Coast, but it's made a huge dent in pricing nonetheless. And so, and I guess with that, in the present, anytime there's a run-up in prices, because of the shale revolution, because we are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, shale drillers will pick up the drill bit, will ultimately put on a ton of volumes, and then prices will collapse. And so the cycles are significantly shorter than they used to be. I mentioned the glorious period where we got the high prices, and I'll speak to that in the next slide. Ultimately, those are very short-lived. And then I guess the last point there, when we look at California natural gas consumption, it is going down, largely driven by solar. And so they've put a lot of solar in place there. It's ultimately decreased the amount of electricity that they're needing and generating via natural gas. Okay, so, I hit on a lot of these points, but ultimately, we see the Henry Hub pricing. That's what hits the television screen on CNBC. Ultimately, as I mentioned, huge disconnects throughout the country on that pricing that folks receive. Again, it's driven by pipeline capacity. The Marcellus, which is really the most prolific natural gas play in the country, its production is capped at about 35% of the U.S.'s natural gas production. It would be significantly higher if they had pipeline capacity to be able to take that gas out of the region. Again, we did have that beautiful period in late 2021 through early 2023, where we saw the craziest pricing, I think, in the history of the San Juan Basin. The pricing that I'm quoting here is the call it average for the month, or they call it first of month pricing. I won't go into all the nitty gritty details. It peaked at $32 an MCF for San Juan. We actually did see daily pricing in the hundreds of dollars per MCF. And so that was a brief period where natural gas companies were, we were printing money. Now, Lagos and really one of the reasons we're able to be so active in the San Juan Basin is we aggressively hedge our gas. And so we lock in prices going, 3 to 4 years into the future. And so our exposure is significantly less to that volatility. And it really allows us to have a business model where whether prices are really good or whether they're really bad, we're able to maintain consistent development. So our hedging program has been huge. I will say with hedges, you lock in your prices, and then ultimately you either make money off your hedges or you lose money. We lost $70 million when lost $70 million on our hedges the month of January 2023 because prices were so high. We were hedged at $8 an MCF, which we were super excited about, but ultimately those high prices crushed us that month. That being said, we still made $15 million profit, so I can't complain too much. We just would have made like $100 million in 1 month had we not been hedged. The flip side of that is we've made up all of that and then some because prices have been so low since 2023. And to put the Permian Basin in context and what's been going on in the Permian, over the last 5 years, the Permian Basin has been average growth of around 2 BCF per day. U.S. production, I think right now is around 110 BCF per day throughout the U.S. San Juan Basin produces 2 BCF per day. And so when you think about it in context and why our prices have dropped significantly, the Permian Basin is growing by a San Juan Basin every year. And so with that, it just, and again, their economics, they don't care what gas prices are because oil prices drive their economics. And so ultimately, that being the reason, the primary driver for prices being where they're at today here in the San Juan Basin. Okay, all right, so the past and the present. A little bit gloomy, right? It's been a tough couple, 15 years here in the San Juan Basin. However, the future looks significantly better, albeit I think we'll have a rough couple years ahead of us before we see prices really increase. But as we look at, the Shale revolution, the cost that it produced to put on those wells really being the fundamental driver of the pricing, and then the Permian Basin. As we look into the future, there's going to be there is a structural change in demand. And so starting in 2006 with the Shale revolution, there was a structural change in supply. Now we're getting into structural change in demand. And so this down here at the bottom, there is a overall production demand forecast put together by one of my investment banks. And you can see looking to go from 103 million a day of natural gas production, 103 BCF per day, which, well, I won't go into units. Units are easy to get confusing pretty quickly. But ultimately, huge increase in demand, like a 50% increase in demand over the next decade. That really being driven by a handful of different variables that I'll be speaking to in the next slide. But ultimately, that really does point towards brighter days in natural gas production. Couple that with the Permian Basin its growth is going to be slowing, and it's already starting to slow down a little bit, not a lot, but its growth is going to be slowing as they're running out of wells to drill there in the Permian. Now it's going to be more of a slower growth and then kind of plateau into the 2030s, but it's not going to be that situation where you're growing by a San Juan Basin every year. So that's going to be slowing down significantly. And I don't like rooting against people that as a general life principle. I like to root towards people's success. I have to admit that what's bad for the Permian Basin is good for the San Juan Basin, and so I'm rooting against the Permian Basin as a whole. So the other, I think, thing that is a good story for us here in the San Juan, normal pricing, we're seeing extremely low pricing this year. Normal pricing we get over the last 5 years, we get $4 to $5 during the wintertime, we get $2 during the spring and the fall, and we get, call it $3 to $4 during the summertime, all very, very driven by weather. And so right now our prices are so low, in part because we have so much supply. Also, it's been a very warm, mild winter. And so on the West Coast, I think it's going to be in the 80s this week. It may be off a little bit. It's been in the 80s for this last few weeks. They just don't turn on their heaters. And so that really being a huge swing and causing a lot of the volatility that we have in natural gas prices, these demand factors that are coming in will provide a more stable level of demand for natural gas. And so we won't be as reliant on a cold, praying for a cold winter out in California. We'll have a good, steady source of demand for our natural gas. So, the biggest driver of this structural change in demand has been exports of natural gas to Asia and Europe. And so that's really saved the day for the United States. Starting in 2016, there was essentially no natural gas being exported of the country. And just for context, as we look at the early 2000s, the talk was that the U.S. needed to import natural gas. And so there was a lot of dollars being spent to import natural gas. Now we're the largest exporter of natural gas in the world, and there's a huge pipeline of projects in the works. And so we went from 0 to around 15 BCF per day. So call it, a little less than 15% of the demand in the United States is exported. The beautiful thing is you get into 2030, all of these, the different stacks here are different projects that are being brought online, ultimately looking to go to 45 BCF by the end of the decade. And so huge growth in demand over the next, you call it 4 or 5 years. And part of that, fortunately for the San Juan Basin, there's an LNG export terminal being worked on in the Baja of Mexico where there'll be an outlet for our gas to go to Asia. Because that going back to the regional issues, San Juan Basin gas, we can't really export it right now to Asia or to Europe. However, when that facility gets put in place, probably the back half of this year, getting to full capacity early next year, there'll be a more steady draw on natural gas production as that facility gets dialed up. But that being one of many, many projects that will be driving the increase in demand over the next 5 years. Also, as you look at natural gas, while I said that solar has grown significantly in California, when you think about the AI needing energy and needing lots of energy and needing incredibly stable energy, solar just doesn't cut it because it's so intermittent. And the data centers for the AI, they require constant power. They can't throttle it down at nights when there's no sun or when it's cloudy. And so ultimately, the AI guys need as much natural gas as they can get. And what the intel we're gathering, they don't care about what they pay for the natural gas. They just want to make sure that it's guaranteed. And so they're locking into long-term contracts in Arizona. Arizona demand is going up while California's dropping. Arizona demand's going up, and it's definitely up and to the right. And that being driven by two factors. One being the data centers. Two, the rational people are fleeing California and moving to Arizona or Texas. And so you're seeing an uptick in prices there. Sorry, anyone who's from California. It's just true. Ultimately, that being a huge mover of natural gas demand, probably the challenging thing is quantifying that is so difficult, and there's a wide range of projections. Credible numbers that I think are in the right zip code. 7 to 10 BCF per day. So not nearly as much as LNG, but it's going to move the needle a lot. And really, that would be stood up a lot faster if there wasn't such a shortage of natural gas turbines throughout the world, because everyone's rushing to try to generate electricity from natural gas. And so there's that huge push to stand up natural gas power plants. And so getting into kind of speaking towards the future demand, again, there being a significant increase in demand forecast over the next, really 20 years. And so these different stacks are the different plays in the country. And so with the bottom stack being, that bottom one being the Marcellus in Pennsylvania, again, that's producing 35% of the United States gas production. The Permian being the next layer on top of that. I won't go through all of the individual layers there, but it's just the various plays throughout the country. As you look at the red dash line is forecasted demand, and then those plays the ones that are not solid colors, that are more the dotted colors, those are just plays that are required to meet the demand of natural gas in the coming decades. So this isn't like real. Like, this supply isn't real. This is just forecasted of what's going to be required from all of the different new basins that are in the works. With that, incredibly fortunate and proud that the Mancos Shale has to be a big part of that, especially in supplying natural gas to the West Coast, supplying natural gas to Arizona. So ultimately, really there's, again, a bright future for the San Juan, because we are required to meet the overall demand needs in the coming decades. Now, there'll be a lot of infrastructure that's continued to be required, but we have great infrastructure here in the San Juan Basin, because rewind 15 years ago, we were producing twice as much gas as we're producing now. So we do have a lot of that infrastructure in place, where a lot of these other basins have to have that infrastructure built out, and they may never get there. And so I have this is a picture from one of our frac jobs out in Rosa, and this is actually not a ChatGPT version of the photo. There really was a double rainbow, although it's not, I don't know how clear it is. Not sure how clear it is. There was the double rainbow there. Maybe it's not, all rainbows into the future. I do think we're going to have a rough couple of years. I think 26 is going to be a really bad year. I think 27 is going to be a rough year. Of course, weather will drive so much of it. If it's incredibly hot during the summer and cold next winter, I'll be completely wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. But ultimately, I think we're looking at a rough couple of years. But beyond 2027, as those structural demand drivers continue to kick in, we'll be seeing better pricing on into the future. And really, the Mancos Shale, again, will be required to meet that demand. It is going to be incredibly bumpy, and so we're going to have a significant amount of volatility, especially the next couple of years. It's going to be incredibly, incredibly volatile, really driven by weather. But again, as we get the demand in place that requires those LNG terminals, they require a certain amount of gas all the time. LNG, liquefied natural gas, sorry for the buzzword for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. Those exports, that natural gas that's exported, they need that running all the time. And so we won't be as weather driven as well as the data centers. And so the West is going to have a significant importance as we're standing up a lot of those data centers. And so ultimately, I think the future is very bright for the San Juan Basin. We do have just a wonderful play in the Mancos Shale, where there's thousands of locations to be drilled over time. And so I think we do definitely have better days ahead of us. With that, that brings me to the end of my presentation. I think we're going to be jumping down to the panel. Is that right? I think at this point. So thank you all for your time and attention.
All right, thank you, J. Paul. That was very, very interesting, especially for those of us not in the industry. My name is Vince Moffit. I chair Four Corners Economic Development, and I'd like to introduce and give the introductions for the next two on our panel. Mr. John Thompson. John earned his BS in geological engineering from the New Mexico State University in 1991. With more than 35 years of oil field experience, Thompson is currently the president of Wash Engineering and Production Corp., a full-service consulting company that provides engineering, well site supervision, lease operations and pumping, regulatory and environmental compliance services, and production accounting services in the San Juan Basin. Recently, Wash was acquired a measurement company along with the gas services in San Juan Basin, along with a gas services analysis company to expand their service options. Welsh has been in business for over 50 years and currently is responsible for over 3,000 active wells in the basin for various operators. John is also the vice president of Epic Energy, an independent oil and gas operator located in the San Juan Basin. Epic owns and operates 480 wells and also has non-operated assets in the San Juan Basin, particularly in the dry gas window of the emerging Mancos play. John also serves on our board for Four Corners Economic Development and was recently nominated to serve on the board for the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. He served 2 consecutive 6-year elected terms as a member of the Board of Trustees for San Juan Community College in Farmington, New Mexico. John? Yeah, just take a seat. We could probably leave you at that table too if you wanted to, but. And the third panel member is Ryan Merrion. Ryan started his career in 2010 as a field engineer for the San Juan Corp. Fracking wells in the Bakken oil field in North Dakota. After 4 years, he moved to Farmington, New Mexico and went to work for Merrion Oil and Gas. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering from the Colorado School of Mines and has 16 years of industry experience. In February of 2022, he assumed the role of president of Merrion Oil and Gas, which is a third-generation family-owned and operated company. Ryan? So we'll have to have you guys share mics, and if there's questions after this initial, they're going to share some information, we'll go ahead and see if we can pass mics around in the room if we need to. So John, I'd like to give you an opportunity to kind of share what you know or want to add to that presentation.
Sure. Is this on?
You might have to.
What's that?
See it? Right there. Yep.
Hold it while I'm talking. Okay, there we go.
No, you can let go now.
Okay, we're good. I'm an engineer too, so I'll be staring at everybody's shoes because I'm an extrovert engineer. No, first of all, I guess, J. Paul, thank you so much for doing the heavy lifting and putting the presentation together. I think it's pretty neat that I'm up here. I just wanted to realize that now I'm the old guy. I used to be the young guy, but now, and I noticed your slides only went back to 2000, and I don't know if that's when you were born or what, but I think it's pretty cool that J. Paul's his great grandfather that drilled one of the first commercial wells in Aztec to start the San Juan Basin. And I started my career working for Ryan's grandpa, J. Greg Merrion. So kind of neat that we're all here this morning. But I'd like to just add a couple things to your presentation that I think to give a little perspective that stands out to me when I talk about the Mancos dry gas window here in the San Juan Basin. And just the perspective is that when the first well was drilled and you look at the volume of gas, I know we're throwing around these different BCF, MCF, TCF numbers, but don't worry about that. But if you just think the number 55, about 55 TCF of gas has been produced out of the entire San Juan Basin since that very first well was drilled. The estimates that's going to come out of the dry gas window of the San Juan Basin is going to at least equal that, if not double it, as some of the indications. So I think it is a vast resource that we have. The other thing that I think is interesting is to see where we are at the play. And I think J. Paul talked a lot about pricing for a reason, because it's a commodity, the pricing that we're all a slave to, and it's really sort of subdued what I think is a major, basin development. And I believe when the first well was drilled in what year? In 2010, WPX and Black Hills, those were the first kind of exploratory wells, and up till about 2024, 25, there was a total of 40 wells that have been drilled, mostly due to, I think can't underestimate or underquote what J. Paul and his team, Krista, you guys have done. I mean, it's truly amazing what where you've taken this. You guys have been on the bleeding edge of technology. I think a lot of companies are, I call it looking over the fence. And because of the low prices, Logos was able to still push forward and develop this world-class resource. And it's truly amazing what you guys have done. So I think that's really cool. But my point is, up till about 2024, there was about 40 of the horizontal Mancos wells drilled total. In the end of 2025, going into 26, there's 40 more. So now there's close to 80, and I think probably 100 now that have been drilled. So other operators are showing up. I've been fortunate to work for several of them. We're partners with a company that drilled, and I guess back to just geographically, so everybody understands, the dry gas Mancos window, if you will. If you think of Navajo Lake as kind of the epicenter, where the Rosa unit is, where Logos has a lot of their acreage, but then all the way up to the airport in Durango, and then as far south. I guess you could say, 10, 15 miles south of Highway 64. But that's an overpressured cell. And so you hear the word dry. Dry just means that there's really no liquid hydrocarbons associated with this gas. But, as you go further south, there is the hydrocarbons or the liquids associated, but it's the pressure cell that we're referring to. This is an overpressured geologic anomaly, if you will, and that's where these huge volumes are coming out of. The only other thing I guess I would point out too, from my perspective, is the I guess shift in gears of what we need for services. These kind of wells require what I call non-traditional San Juan Basin service providers. I mean, we don't frankly have the rigs to drill this deep. We don't have the, I was, being the old guy, I was here when there were 40 rigs drilling, and there were 5 different frac companies with multiple frac crews available. Now, I see the Gore guys here smiling at me, but, they all left during that downturn that J. Paul was pointing out. So slowly, we're starting to hit this threshold of, the critical work, hopefully stable work that's going to be, that will bring the vendors back in. But, there's going to be a lot of hurdles, I believe. And since I did hear there were some policymakers in the room, I do want to make that pitch that the San Juan Basin, being located in New Mexico and Colorado, I think we have some hurdles here from a policy standpoint. Unfortunately, we're not in the most business-friendly environment for oil and gas, which is very unfortunate. I mean, I guess if you're on any email chain, you've all been getting the Clear Horizons, please vote against stuff. So it's just things like that. I'm associated with a company that's developing some projects in East Texas, and it wasn't lost on me, very similar to what we're doing. In the Mancos here, they were able to do a well proposal and get an APD, a permit to drill, and have a rig standing in 45 days. The project that I was involved with, or still involved with Navita Resources up in Colorado, it took us 2.5 years. I can't even put a number on but it's thousands, if not $1 million, to get a permit to do the same thing. So if you're trying to bring capital in to invest in, where are you going to go? I mean, that's a challenge for us here. So just wanted to throw that out. But anyway, that's kind of my just addition. So thanks again for letting us be here.
Thanks, John. Ryan, give you the same opportunity.
All right. So as far as gas prices, we were talking to our gas marketer last board meeting, and he said for near term, consumers enjoy the low prices, and for producers, start praying. And so as J. Paul mentioned, this next year is going to be tough, but we've been accustomed to low prices, and so we've gotten good at operating and figuring out ways to make money when gas prices below $2. I think the other thing to mention is there's a lot of ways to play the Mancos Shale. Merrion Oil and Gas is a smaller operator, and so we don't have the capital to go out and drill a bunch of horizontal wells, but we still play the game in a different way. We're able to partner with different companies, and so down in the oil window, we're in the Nageezi unit with Enduring, and so we've been able to watch as they've developed the oil play down there. And then up in the northern part, we're non-op working interest with other companies like Navita, and we've been able to partner with them and get our feet into the Mancos. The other interesting aspect of the Mancos development play is its impact on other companies within the community. And so as the oil and gas producers succeed, other service companies succeed as well. We're in a disposal well, which disposes of produced water. And so as these Mancos wells flow back and produce water, that company benefits from that. And then we're also invested in a compressing company, which benefits alongside having additional gas within the basin. And so there's a lot of different ways to play the game, and so I think it's fun to see something like this. It's a resource that keeps on giving, and the community benefits from it. And so we're excited to see where it goes and how we can play our part and enjoy the resource.
All right, thank you. We're going to open the questions, and I'm going to start because I'm really curious about this. You mentioned, J. Paul, about the oil in the Permian, the byproduct natural gas, and with it not being that here in the Mancos Shale area, does that affect it? I would imagine our gas is cleaner than the gas that they're producing.
That's a good question. From a clean standpoint, I would say they're as clean as us, and really the big driver being the large companies, the equipment necessary to be have methane intensity is what people talk about a lot, and it's how much methane you emit when you are for what you produce. And so you look at the big companies in the Permian Basin, they have those big wells, and so they're able to spend significant dollars to have very low emissions. So with that, they have a lower methane intensity. Now, a lot of their smaller wells have higher methane intensity, but I'd say as a whole, the Permian is pretty clean.
Okay. Other questions?
I've got a mic here, and I'm going to be wandering around, but since I have it, I do have a question on something I think a lot of us are interested with, J. Paul, and that relates to the infrastructure on getting gas out of the basin. You talked about California demand declining, driven by renewables and weather and other things like that. Kinder Morgan, Enterprise, others, are there any plans, have you heard anything about two things? One is available capacity for local offtake, and secondly, moving gas further to the south and east to get it to other markets, realizing we're still competing against Permian, but I'm guessing we have a huge surplus of gas pipeline capacity here that's underutilized that we should think about. Could you talk about that? Because we think about what you said about AI and what we heard in October and data centers. I think it's a very relevant piece of the conversation.
Yeah, so again, kind of going back to the San Juan Basin, once producing 4 BCF or twice as much gas as we're producing now, we have ample takeaway capacity for San Juan Basin gas. What we don't have is the demand there. And so ultimately, there being the ability, as we look at the Mancos and growth in the Mancos, we're ultimately able to have that takeaway capacity for that gas. And then, to your point, as there's the increase in demand in Arizona, we'll be able to move that gas there as well as to California. The southernmost gas, going down, we won't, at this point in time, there won't be gas sent, to the Permian and down that way. We do send gas up the Rockies at times, and so we do send gas to the West Coast. We also send gas to the Rockies, and so I think those are our primarily outlets. And until the Permian gets in a place where it's overbuilt, the pipeline infrastructure is overbuilt, we'll be competing there. Now, the positive side about the Permian, as I talked about, its production growth is going to be falling off. Also, they get significantly, even though they don't care about pricing, you're ultimately, if you're a capitalist, you care about money, and so ultimately they do get better pricing in the Gulf. And as all of that LNG is coming online, their demand for the demand on the Gulf of America, ultimately will be significantly higher. And so it's tough to see how the future plays out, but in the next 5 years, there could be a place where we're sending gas.
And
further
so
south.
as a result, we're not going to see new pipelines being built here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Hold on one second, Chris. I got a question.
One thing I think it's important that I want to add to this, just in the last 6 months, Four Corners Economic Development, we get projects. We get projects from states. We get projects from site developers. We had one project within the last 6 months that asked for and had a requirement of 1 billion cubic feet a day of natural gas. 1 billion. So that would be half the capacity of this entire basin for one single project. So the appetite for fuel, the appetite for natural gas, the appetite for energy production is extremely large. The PJM, which is the major backbone, it's the major power backbone for the East Coast and runs through several states. They do energy auctions, and they do it usually 2 years in advance, and the large energy providers, the companies, buy their power from it. For the first time in 2027, the auction, there was not enough power. For the first time, major backbone in the United States that covers a lot of the east, northeast, down to the Midwest, there was not enough power and capacity for the AEPs, for the Appalachian Powers, the Kentucky Powers, and others to purchase 2 years in advance and know where their power is coming from. So we have the opportunity to use power here in situ, because we're seeing more and more opportunities for people to want to use the competitive advantage of applying and using the gas here for production, for competitive advantages, for manufacturing here in this region, for we don't have to ship it out. We don't have to use the pipelines, and there's a stable price point for manufacturing in this region. And that's something we're seeing. It's not just data centers, but it's people looking for power and looking for steady opportunities. So this is great information about our connectivity to the world, but but it's also a great opportunity for the community and this region to grow and to prosper and even to diversify based upon their opportunity of bringing energy to a competitive advantage for manufacturing.
That's a great point. Yep.
All right, other questions?
Hold on, Cliff. We're doing a recording here.
He's running, Cliff. Doesn't happen very often.
I'm curious about AI and how you're using it in your industry. Is it making a difference in the production side? Is it making a difference in the sale and marketing side? Is it predictive? It's great, but how's it changing your industry?
I think, as far as the way we use it, we use Microsoft's Copilot, and that helps with, writing emails and doing Excel spreadsheets. I think it's still in its infancy where, there's some hallucinations and some glitches where it's not quite there yet, but it's crazy to watch how it's progressed in such a short period of time, and I think that's what's crazy, because it's on a super high learning curve, and so as far as the way we use it, it's not to its full potential, but we do use it just for the generative aspect of it. As far as operating telemetry and stuff with that, I think it's there's algorithms and stuff that aren't fully AI capable, but it's definitely, I think, going to be part of the industry, and I think we'll continue to use it and see how it advances.
You guys mind if I weigh in just a little bit here? Or John, do you want?
No, go ahead.
No, you go. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, other than, I think just to reinforce what Ryan said, it's in its infancy. We're starting to see more and more applications for it. I think it's the base, novelty things like ChatGPT, and I'm now talking to that like when my wife won't talk to me, so I find that answers a lot of my questions. But I think we're starting to really zero in on how can we improve the human element in the field, and we're starting to, I guess in the last 6 months, I've met some really smart people that are opening doors, and so we're pretty excited to see where this can go. Right now in the field, I think, because that's mostly what my company does, there's a heavy human element still involved. Even, I know the laterals we're operating in La Plata County, even though we have it fully automated, we've noticed that there's still gaps, and we're not comfortable enough not to have that man 24 hours a day, just because of where it's located. But an example is if a pinhole starts to develop, the automation will shut it down when it's a complete failure, but it won't catch that pinhole where a human will. So we're still trying to see how can, it's a pressure differential, but it's not finite enough. Right now, the human eye can still see that, make those changes. We're not there yet, but I think it's truly coming.
Yeah, if I may weigh in, this has really been a huge push for us at Lagos for the last year and a half as AI has blown up significantly. So we're pushing hard to use it throughout the organization. And, ultimately, as I look at where we're at here in San Juan, one of the big challenges of being a big operator here in the San Juan Basin now is we don't have access to great technical resources. And so you think about like the Burlington Resources days, who I broke out with, there were dozens of engineers, probably a dozen geologists, rough numbers, working for the company. At this point, Lagos, Merrion, and Walsh, and Epic, and Dugan, I think, are the only sizable operators that are here in the San Juan Basin that have kind of corporate headquarters here. And so we're able to leverage AI on everything from our computer programmer. We get millions of transactions per month, financial transactions, and so really being able to take that data. Our computer scientist, data scientist, he's able to build out these systems that we can process that data in seconds, versus it taking a significantly longer period to be able to digest. And with that, the work he is doing, he said it himself, he could never do it on his own. And so when it comes to developing these software systems, which he's doing a lot of, it would take dozens of coders to be able to develop them to the level of sophistication that we need. And he's able to do it himself and able to leverage that. Of course, there are other hallucinations, and there's no getting away from having the human element. And I think our field operations are incredibly safe. And when we think about San Juan Basin focused operators where we're at, we're in the beginnings of being able to leverage this great technical resource, I would say, to not have to have this centralized office in Houston, Texas, where there's a lot of reservoir engineers and geologists and the like. We're able to run leaner and meaner. With that, that's so critical when it comes to operating at incredibly low prices. Your cost of production needs to be incredibly low, and so by using AI tools to help us in that regard, as well as every regard, I mean, the organization is really adapting. We use, I think, probably half a dozen different platforms of, you've got ChatGPT, you've got Copilot, you have Anthropic. We're using a lot of different platforms, and I'm really encouraging everyone to dig in as much as possible. And it's a little bit of cliche at this time, but it's the fundamentally, AI won't take your job. It's someone who knows how to use AI will take your job. And so it really is growing exponentially. The models are getting smarter and smarter. I have to admit, yesterday was a 14-hour day. It's been an incredibly busy time at Lagos. I unfortunately worked on these slides from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and I probably would have not gotten them done, or at least they would have been really bad had I not been able to leverage AI. And it's even funny, so I got I had the historical San Juan Basin gas prices, and I have inflation data, and it's been a while since I've done inflation adjustment calculations. It's not complex mathematics, but it's been a while, and I'm sitting there like thinking, at 8:30 last night, how do I do this? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get a spreadsheet. I'm going to dump gas prices in here. I'm going to dump inflation data in here, and I asked it to build me a spreadsheet to ultimately inflation adjust natural gas prices. Within seconds, it was done. And so I think those are a lot of the different ways the industry is using it in reservoir characterization, getting into the question, a lot on the reservoir assessment, getting smarter and smarter about that, drilling, completions, et cetera. So really, it's going to have ripple effects throughout the entire industry, and it already is. And so I think it's an incredibly exciting time, and it's going to allow us to get more and more efficient at our business and better at our business. So.
You mentioned the threats and challenges and the uncertainty of the regulatory and policy decisions coming out of Santa Fe and Colorado to some degree. I know it's a hard question, but can you speak more to the way you are practically taking that into consideration and how you view that into the positive projections for the next 20 years that J. Paul talked about?
It's, I guess, just knowing the timing of it and trying to factor that into your planning is about all we can do. We try to stay engaged with the trade organizations, to try to get some sort of, semblance of, what do they call that, regulatory certainty. But it's certainly a challenge. I think one of the things I mentioned earlier is trying to level load the work. We're also at a disadvantage here. We have like winter closures, and so I think it's difficult, say for a frac company here that, right now our work's essentially seasonal. And so everybody's trying to, drill their wells at the same time and complete their wells at the same time. I think that's, I know WPX when they first started, they did get some reprieve from the BLM to where they were able to drill during the winter in the Rosa unit. I think things like that are going to happen to try to make this work across the board. But it's definitely going to be a big challenge for everybody that comes here. As a side note, Mach Energy is a new player that bought the ICAV, thank you, which is the historical BP Amoco assets. and I'm friends with one of their regulatory folks, and she was telling me that, you know, they came in here ready to go. They're from Oklahoma, and they fully intended to have 2 rigs up and running by the end of December. And she said, what year? And they were like, well, this year, of course. And she's just like, well, I need to explain how some things work here. And so those are the challenges that we're up against. But hopefully, policy matters, and who we vote for matters in this. So.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, ultimately for us, when it comes to the APDs, because it is, as John mentioned, a 2-year-ish cycle time from the time you pick a location where you want to drill to the time you're actually able to put the drill bit to work. We work years in advance to secure those APDs, and so we're working on even our 5-year time horizon, APDs for the next 5 years. So we're teed up and we're able to drill and produce when we want to. We do, working to try to balance the seasonal restrictions, as John said. That's the wonderful thing. We drilled our first well up in Colorado, and so it was near the Nuvito well that John helped drill, and that both Ryan and John are partners in. Ultimately, we drilled our first well up there, great well. There's no seasonal restrictions there in terms of drilling, and so it works well. We're being able to run a rig up in the north during the wintertime, and then down in New Mexico during the spring, summer, and fall. And so, but again, yeah, it does take a ton of planning, and it is excruciating. To say the least. I saw those press releases from Mock when they were first talking 2 to 3 rigs, and I'm like, and we worked really, we were almost bought that deal. Unfortunately, they stole it at the last minute. But I was well acquainted with the assets, and I'm like, what APDs do you have that you're going to be able to run 2 to 3 rigs?
Well, and to add, I guess, why he mentioned that being in Colorado where they weren't under a wildlife restriction. Just a little bit further to the west where we were, we are under a wildlife restriction there. So it's checkerboard. The Southern Ute tribe is going to have we didn't mention them, but they're going to have a big role in this. I think they were on the sidelines for quite a while watching, but now they've got their own water company. Red Willow's actively drilling wells, but because of the tribal nature and the county and the state in Colorado, it's very confusing there too. So just like I said, it's a difficult challenge across the board to meet the regulatory environment.
Yep. All right, we're pushing up to the 9:00 hour. Was there one more question anybody had that? And I'm sure the panelists will be around afterwards if people have more questions. One of the things I'd like to add to that comment about the Clear Horizon bill that's being pushed. Oh, wait. We do have one other question. I want to make sure everybody knows NAMOGA and Four Corners Economic Development and the Farmington Chamber of Commerce has sent out information throughout the session. We're down to the last 10 days. There are opportunities for public comment, either when they're in the hearings, or we usually will list the people that are on the committees that are hearing these bills. Your legislators, but call them, email them, maybe send them a text message. And I know that all our legislators in our area are supportive of our industries here. I do know on the western side, Representative Hernandez, he might be someone who, if you're in his district, that you might want to contact him. It'd be very important, and it's really important to tell your story from your perspective, culturally, your family, your livelihood, whatever it is, to make sure they understand the impact these things will have on you. So with that being said, one more question.
Okay. Okay. So I guess my last question is how can we help? Because we talked about development and projects and things and how those require a lot of gas, so we can definitely do that. There's a lot of people moving in from California, Arizona, and actually nationwide. New Mexico, I ask people all the time in my business of product, why do you move here? And they're like, it's great. You have everything that we want from Colorado to New Mexico. And I'm like, really? I never thought about that living here for my whole life, 45 years. So we making people feel welcome and appreciated and loved here. They'll stay here and they'll use a lot of our resources. They'll build homes here. They will eat in our restaurants, everything that we need that produces or that uses gas. And finally, like you said, definitely who we vote for has a lot so that you guys can get what you need done. But is there anything else that we as a community and as this area can do to help you guys or support you guys? Can you think of anything you haven't told us?
I mean, I think just spreading the word and letting people know what the industry does and what it supports. Last year, $13 billion came from the oil and gas industry to support state and local governments, which is almost half of the budget for the state. And so, I mean, it really has an impact on schools and the medical industry and the way of life. And so just spreading the word and information, I think, is important so people know exactly what the oil and gas industry does and are informed.
I think what Vince just mentioned about, contacting, I don't want to ruin the morning here, but I've been dragged, if you really want to find out a whole new world, is go to Santa Fe during the session. I've been dragged into that because of just being involved with the trade organizations, and it is really shocking how other parts of the state view us. And it's I know that was my first thing with Four Corners Economic Development when they asked, that I be on the board, was I'm pretty adamant about trying to lobby has a group, not just the oil and gas industry, but has the city of Farmington, has the county, San Juan County, because I was really shocked at some of the comments that are coming from the state reps from I call it the Rio Grande corridor, and they really look. I mean, there were some pretty harsh comments made, and I thought, the mayor of Carlsbad was there on the particular meeting that I was at. So I guess just in a nutshell, get involved. There's really some people that don't have our best interests at heart that are making policies for us, and they feel like they're doing it for our benefit, which is even more shocking. So I guess it's nobody likes politics, nobody likes to deal with it, but just understand that there's a lot going on in Santa Fe that can really have adverse effects on us here. So that would be my only ask, is to try to be as engaged as you possibly can with our elected officials and ask that question to them. What can you do? And a lot of it, I think, really helps when they have a real person talking to them. I've seen that have some huge benefit.
I do want to give a huge shout out to the elected officials here. I complain about being a natural gas producer here in the San Juan Basin and the suffering that's involved in that. Our local elected officials, especially if you're spending time in Santa Fe, we appreciate your sacrifice, because it is a lot of suffering for a Republican in Santa Fe. I'll hit it from a little bit different angle in terms of, support from Four Corners Economic Development. As we look at what we're doing in the Mancos, the level of sophistication required for all services are on a completely different level than what the San Juan Basin has had historically. And so with that, we really need to get our vendor community here in the San Juan Basin improved as much as possible. I don't think we'll be needing to build out frac fleets and the like, but ultimately, as we look at our service providers here in the basin, my ask is, get up to speed as much as you can on what you need for to be able to be competitive. I hate using vendors from outside the basin. Unfortunately, we have to in order to compete. The expertise, the tools, et cetera, that's required. Really encourage all service providers to just get as smart on the stuff as you can. Make those investments in people and equipment. And with that, if you're an investor, if you have the capital to provide for those businesses, highly encourage you to be supportive of that. as of those endeavors is many times, unfortunately, in this business, you have to take leaps of faith, and we have to take a lot of risk with our capital, and so be supportive of our service providers there, and as well as any other services that are ancillary that touch the businesses. And so I think with that, the great thing about it is there's great opportunity here for our local service providers, and so I think that's the big piece, as well as being supportive of the Gore is here. Again, we won't be able to. There's not going to be local-based frac fleets, but being able to get our people skilled up to be able to work on those crews, as well as being supportive of those businesses that are willing to come here to the San Juan Basin and have a place, have a yard, et cetera, and put local community members to work. So, yep.
All right, thank you, Ryan, John, J. Paul. Thank you guys for sitting on the panel. Appreciate it very much. And just in closing, I think Tim has a couple of last remarks. Thank you.
Well, we're going to try to make the trains run on time, okay? So, and that's important, and that's going to happen too in this community. Just a couple things, but they are important. Things like today just don't happen. Companies like this invest in the community, and they're here for the long haul. And we're honored to have these companies here today. What you've heard is a historical overview and also a view of the future. But speaking of the future, and I want to say thank you to some specific people here, because they're our partners and they help make things happen. San Juan College School of Energy at 10 o'clock today is holding a job fair for Gore Nitrogen. And Gore Nitrogen is in the room today. And they're hiring significant numbers of people for family wage jobs in this community, just like what we just heard. They're doing a hiring fair from 10 to 1 at the Hutton campus of San Juan College, and from 2 to 5 at the School of Energy. So if you know anyone that that's a CDL driver, equipment operator, engineer, or is interested in exploring a career, a good career with a good company coming to this region, have them come out. And that's great news for all of us. And these are the things that we're talking about, is the opportunities that are here and the opportunities that are coming as well. I have a couple of thank yous. Spud Nuts, Johnny O's, they provided your breakfast today. So thank you very much for that. On your table, there's flyers for the Four Corners Professional Development Organizations doing a conference, and the conference is Power Up Tools, and it's February 26th, and there's flyers on the table. Take a look at that. The next quarterly breakfast will be in May. We haven't picked the topic yet. We're very careful about trying to pick topics that's on point for the business community, that provides you information you didn't have when you walked in here, that has nuggets that you can apply to help run your business and make decisions. So if each one of you, if you have a thought of what the next thing is and what we should be providing, please let us know. We haven't set the date yet, but it will be in May on this. And other than that, it's time for us to go to work. Thank you very much for coming today, and appreciate you.